Welcome, children, to the Actionable Analytics Data Mart annual update. So I'm Josh. This is Sarah. We're on the Data Mart team, and you're all surprised. All right, so we're going to tell you what the Data Mart is, just in case you don't know. Oh, sorry, your slide.
It's all right. I'm the little black cat. That's me. So what is the Actionable Analytics Data Mart? We're going to talk about what was done last year during last year's conference. Did any of you guys attend last year's Data Mart conference? Oh, look at that. Okay, good. What is new since? What's on the roadmap? And then we're going to show you some resources to help you figure out a little more about Data Mart. So what is the Actionable Analytics Data Mart? Data Mart is awesome, right? Do you guys know the Lego theme? Yeah, Data Mart is awesome. Okay, so student analytics, data enrichment. That's kind of where most of it lives. They are mostly essay objects. So most of them start with essay, except it's not Sun Awards. Don't get it mixed up. Some of them start with the ASU, and they are all in the Redshift Enterprise Data Warehouse. Some of them are in ASU Student Analytics Schema. Others in there are in the ASU Student, ASU Common, ASU Global. They're kind of scattered about. Primarily, they're there to support Actionable Analytics predictive models and Campaign Builder, which are awesome things. But they're also for broader use, hopefully things you guys get to use or will use. They capture changes to underlying data, and that little asterisk means that we're going to tell you more about that later. It simplifies and aggregates the data. Hopefully, the goal is to build some standard business logic into the data and create consistency with structure and nomenclature. So basically, it makes your lives easier, right? Giant, big, easy button. Take it away, Jeff.
Hey, look, it's me. I'm that guy. So prior materials, so 2020 data conference, I did a presentation that kind of explained why we were going down this road to building the Data Mart, and it used this long, drawn-out analogy that was absolutely fantastic, brilliant. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go watch it. And then last year, I did our first annual update, and it was mostly about what we had done that first year of development. So those are out there. And so the work we had done prior to last year's conference, we had done some Canvas-based development in collaboration with Paul Alvarado. So you can see that in the learning schema. We've got the activity log, which is based on the Cal Canvas table, which is just a log of everything that happens in Canvas. We did some enrichment to make it easier to use. For instance, there are flags for what are class activities versus non-class activities. There's an ID for what class it was for. What else, Phil?
Well, in there if you want to know minutes, we estimate how many minutes a student has been in a Canvas shell.
It's like the duration for each action.
How many times they've had a session instance, and then how many things they've clicked within the shell. So those are three main fields that are used pretty frequently.
So there's the start of session, the end of the session, everything happens in between, login events, logout events, all the very basic things. And we'll be talking a little bit later about some of what we're going to be building on top of that in this upcoming year. The other two crosswalk tables are made to make it easier to use that activity data in conjunction with PeopleSoft enrollment data. So there's a table to crosswalk the person level IDs, so one record per student, or instructor, or staff, everyone who has Canvas activity records. And the other one is class. Class between PeopleSoft and Canvas is not one-to-one, so the grain of that table is a little bit different. All right, in student, we had service indicators. So some of you might have tried to use service indicator audit records in the past. Complete disaster. I don't recommend it. We built this so that you don't have to use those. This is nice and clean. It's just a history of all the service indicator activity. And then the impact's kind of a dimension. We have student class, which is kind of like PS student enroll, but we've aggregated across academic career to make it a little easier to use. So it's 1 record per student per class. And there's lots of details that you'd find in something like student enroll. SA class is a class dimension similar to PS class, PS ASU class, PS ASU class extension. So it's another one, but again, adding in more information as well as capturing what you'd expect to find in most of those other tables. So more useful, hopefully. Student term, 1 record per student per term, lots in there. Student year, mostly financial aid at this point, 1 record per student per academic or age year, same thing. And then student ACAD, which is 1 record per student, and it's academic focused data. So we're going to be talking more about what's in there or what's going into there as well.
All right, recent additions. So what have we done recently? We've made some updates. He was just talking about service indicators. It used to be just SA service indicator. We've changed the name. It is now student service indicator because it's student focused. So there was the rename. We added some additional, what we like to call naughty flags. There's like some administrative flags. There's some disciplinary flags. There's, things like that. They're very similar. They, right? The naughty ones. Yeah, behavior, whatever. They are all very similar. But there's some nuance based on the combination of service indicators that are used to create them.
We had different stakeholders who wanted different combinations.
Yes.
And so we made everybody happy.
Yeah. So I want to say there's 5 that are the naughty flags. So look out for those. They're fun. Also, student analytics. Oh yeah, the student term. We completed that one, or was that phase?
We did an update
2
to that.
Yes, we did a phase 2 to that. So we've added some flags, some student credit hour based on basic enrollment stages.
Dropped, enrolled, withdrawn,
Yes.
that kind of stuff.
Yes. Service indicator counts, so literal counts per student, academic standing statuses, and some financial aid disbursement amounts. I know we all look forward to finding out those, right? Brand new, so fun stuff. No, not changes, brand new. We've added a plan dimension, SA plan, student group, grade, race, ethnicity, and you notice that one is in ASU, not SA, and then the date dimension as well. And we're going to tell you more about those.
All right, so the plan dimension, it's basically what you get if you put the PeopleSoft plan dimension together with the IA census plan dimension. And we've taken all the most useful things from both of those and put them into one place. And this is an SCT, so we're capturing changes as well. So you can see all the history. So you get the college, the unit, the division, the campus. A lot of that exists on the PeopleSoft side, and it's not just PS Acad Plan table, right? There's some of that's coming from Acad Org table, Acad Prog table, Acad Campus. There's one that associates campuses with something and orgs with plans, and there's a bunch of them, but all that logic's just kind of built in there. And then a lot of that also comes from IA. So you're going to find a lot of fields in that table that have IA in the name, and that basically indicates it's IA's version versus the PeopleSoft version. So you're going to get lots of descriptions that you'd expect to find within a dimension. We're going to bucket plans in different ways. We're going to create flags for things like exploratory. We have the CIP codes for each of the plans. And we pulled in the math intensity level, which I've also found out is not used very consistently, even within a college. So use that at your own risk.
Sorry, is that the math intensity? If you look at a major math, it'll say the math intensity and list the math course or the first math course that's listed on major math.
I don't know if that's the same that you find in major map. It's from plan extension, Diana? Yeah.
So it'll say like general advanced. Major math is used in data. Hey Josh, what was the plan table name? Thanks, mentioned.
essay plan?
Yes, essay plan. So we have the SAT that captures the changes and then the simulated snapshot, which presents it as of each day.
It's just correct. Is math the only subject that is like singled out that is like used specially?
Yes.
You have like that's the
People get frustrated with math, I think, so, you know. Oh, sorry, was there another question? Yeah. So student group, students in groups, basically. It allows, oh yeah, change capture of PS student groups occur plus the PS student group table. Don't ask me to say that 3 times.
So the first one is which students are in which groups right now, and we're capturing changes, but we also have that student group table to get descriptions and whatnot from the dimension. So we call this a proactive table because it's a log, but with like an integrated dimension.
Thank you. He is very good at explaining that. So some of the flags that are in this, we've got some honors student flags. So literally you can just go in and find out if they're honor student, exchange student, visiting scholar, military affiliation. Do they have a military affiliation? ROTC, TRIO. Also, we've got some information about ASU local location, confirmed location.
Yeah, so there's other local student groups for unconfirmed. We have not included that up to this point. And the military is specifically the student group side of military, nothing to do with service indicators, admissions, any of that data. So another dimension for grades. This is more traditional. There's no change capture. I don't even think we update this every day because it doesn't really change. It's just a list of grades you'd find in course grade off of student enroll or in ASR data. And it allows you to add in additional context based on a grade in an efficient way, right? So it's dimension. So you're going to have like a description for the grade, which sounds kind of weird. But if you go in and look at it, you'll see what that means. Essentially the grade points you get for that grade, which you'd find in student enroll maybe, but if you have ASR data, you might want to do something equivalent, do some additions, some averages over time. It makes it easier to do that. And then we have buckets based on the sentiment. Is this a positive grade, a negative grade, a neutral grade? We strip off positives and negatives if you just want to compare everything equally, because not all instructors use positives and negatives. When I say positive, plus and minus grades. We have flags that bucket them into different combinations of grades for different purposes. If you want to do something like DEW rates, stuff like that, it's gonna make it easier. Lots of buckets.
Got a quick question about the like grades like W's and things that don't have GPAs associated with, and PS student enroll, they automatically assign them a 0. So you have to write logic to sort of make those nulls or
So
no GPA, or did you do that here, or does it still have a 0 as a default?
yeah, so I think PS student enroll in the warehouse assigns it a 0.
Yes.
That's the key, right? PS student enroll in PeopleSoft ODS, it's probably a null. So that's a warehouse null handling issue. I believe we stripped that off. Yeah. So we're trying to do as much pre-processing to make your lives easier.
Easy button.
Is this career specific?
No, it's not like the Ed Plus dimension. We basically said we're going to go with the undergrad stuff, and it's close enough. I think in our documentation, there are some notes on some of the columns about how you might want to use them or use them a little bit differently for grad careers. All right, so we have a race and ethnicity dimension. This was a fun one. I got to learn how to do recursive CTEs for this. So a lot of you have probably used the race and ethnicity data out of the person view. That's traditionally used from reporting. You get things like 2 or more, which is kind of problematic in a lot of use cases. So this was our effort to make more inclusive identifiers. Eventually I'm going to probably get there, so I'm not going to go too far ahead of the slide. All right, so it's based on the ethnic group table, which is the dimension within PeopleSoft. And so what we're doing is creating all possible combinations of ethnic group codes that someone could identify as. And then we also make combinations that include the T for two or more, the X for international, so that it can be more easily used as the current version that you'd find in uPerson as well. Now, this dimension right now is a little bit difficult to use because you need that same code essentially at the student level, at the staff level, in order to use this dimension. So creating that's not trivial. Right now, there is a query in the SQL repository that you can use. You can add it to your queries. It'll pull that up for everybody. You can join it in. We're still working on some of the documentation around this because it's brand new. And I don't know if the tweak's been done yet or not, but the structure of that code is going to change a little bit. So this is still a little bit in flux, but I think it's going to be really useful. So I wanted to tell you about it. It's using the ASU prefix instead of the SA prefix because it's not just student analytics, which is what the SA stands for. This is also useful potentially for HR. But with the HR side, the international definition, the X, uses visa data. The visa data in PeopleSoft really only applies to students because HR has their own process, their own tables to record that information. So international is for students only. And yeah, so we have lots of flags for each of the races and ethnicities, different buckets, including the traditional iPads, but also a couple different derivations of the iPads that treat the international and the two or more a little bit differently, for instance. So lots of cool stuff in there. I encourage you to go check it out.
Date dimension. It's a list of dates, right? Simple. It's basically a crosswalk of various versions and formats of term and academic year. It's got the relative day number of term, like ASU S term day in the snapshots, variations. Specifies some academic calendar milestones, not quite all of them yet, but we've got some significant ones in there. And we're not trying to duplicate an existing table because it doesn't have the holidays yet, but we're thinking about adding some at some point.
So the existing D-Day, similar structure, one record per date, no change capture, just like this one, but it's more fiscally oriented. You get a lot of fiscal quarters and fiscal months and all that stuff that we don't care about on the student side for the most part. So.
Future plans. I like future. Oh, this you.
Okay. So I'm gonna maybe just blow through all these because we are
we've got
I don't know
4
how
minutes.
much time we're gonna have because I don't know how many slides are left. So things that are currently in progress. So I mentioned last year we had done the student ACAD, academic oriented student data. Now we're doing bio demos. So it's still one record per student, but it's a different area of data. And if you, I think I actually stripped that out of the presentation I did yesterday. Never mind. So we're going to be taking these student level change capture tables and combining them into a single student level simulated snapshot. So you're not going to have separate tables for each of these data domains. It's just all going to be in one object for usability. That's the current plan. So we need to do a lot of testing on the performance of that. We also are working on student term CUR, which takes the student term data, but it's just as of today. So it takes out all the history, all the change capture. It's more typical of what you'd find elsewhere, but it also brings in additional columns that we don't have change capture on. Things like LMS aggregations are going to be coming in the future. The first one is taking the predictive model outputs from the Actionable Analytics predictive models and bringing them in. So those will be more easily accessible. We have additions to student term that we're also working on. So the advisor, more service indicator counts, graduation status. a more complete military definition. So it's going to include not just student groups, but also the service indicators, some housing data, and the satisfactory academic progress info. Also working with the ET Enterprise Enriched Datasets project to create recurring National Student Clearinghouse polls that are accessible through Redshift. So that data is going to be easier to use. We're going to be building some enrichment on top of it as well to make it more usable, especially for specific use cases like, hey, which of our applicants got denied and where'd they go, or which got admitted, never enrolled, where'd they go? Student was here, didn't graduate, where'd they go? All that kind of stuff, more easy to answer those once this data is ready. And then a person level table, which is one record per person being different than student, and then a person can also be a staff or faculty. So similar to what we're doing with the essay student tables, but this is going to be data that applies not just to students, but other types of affiliations as well. And that's where you're going to get that race ethnicity code. Yeah, I'm just going to blow through this. So future, we're going to be doing more with the term dimension, more with the date dimension, specifically on academic milestones from the calendar, more in student ACAD, cohorts, highlights, transcript requests, which you might get from the retention table right now, something similar to that, more aggregations, more indicators, but we're also going to be aggregating student term data. So you might have like, what is the student's primary plan in the current term? Something you probably use all the time, but we're going to put it at the student level to make it easier to access. I mentioned LMS aggregations being done on top of that activity table. So things like number of clicks or average number of clicks in a class for the term, for the current term, or total number of clicks up until this point, or last activity date, or standard deviation of clicks for their classes relative to similar students in other classes. All that fun stuff that we're currently using in the predictive models. We're going to be building a prog dimension, similar to the plan dimension, higher level. We're going to build a session dimension, similar to the term dimension. And like we did with the date dimension. So you can have the date, like what's the current term, what's the next term as of this date. We'll do the same thing with sessions, current session, next session, prior session. Adding STEM and some more plan extension data into the plan dimension. All right. I think this is almost the end, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a page out there in the analytics portal. If you search for Actionable Analytics, you'll find the group. Within there is a link to the data mart objects. If you've done FAFSA and you say, hey, I just want to see what the data mart objects are, you can request access to the group and Phil's going to approve it. Or if you have this link, you might be able to go straight to the page yet. I haven't actually tested this, but we think you might be able to go straight to the page without getting group access. But there's also other fun stuff in there that you might be interested in. So why not? So that's how you get there. Analytics, groups, all groups, Actionable Analytics, data mart objects, or use the link. This is what it looks like. So this is basically all the documentation that we've put together for everything we've developed or is currently being developed. So all the specs, all the SQL, the summary sheets, which help you use it, links to the objects in Calibra. We explain what they are. There's also a link to kind of using SCTs and SSNPs, because there's some things you want to know before you start going too far down that path, because your queries can blow up in your face rather quickly. It's a lot of data in those tables. So there's a link to a document that helps with that. Oh, that's right. I was going through. This was going to be really cool. It's going to explain all these different things and what's in them.
Gotcha. Ta-da.
Hey. Questions, comments.
The first group that's actually stuck with the data.
That's surprising.
Yeah,
It's fun.
I did in my presentation with Ezzy yesterday. She didn't, but I did.
I have a question. We've had some recent requests about my ASU activity. And people always start with Canvas activity as someone logged into a course.
Yeah.
Canvas activity, and now we have that, and now they want to know, well, what about my ASU? Have they been in my ASU yet? Is that something you guys have surfaced at all or are planning to surface?
Phil, you want to take that one?
So it's on the roadmap, but our roadmap's pretty deep.
Yeah.
So we'll usually plan 1 quarter in advance. So what we're doing now, what we're doing next. So it's not in this quarter or next quarter.
Okay.
But if there's enough demand to justify it, yeah, we could have that conversation. So I say, once a month, we have a student data enrichment meeting. I know sometimes you'll come with, I'd say that's a great forum to bring that up, and we can talk it out and say, all right, does this make sense to bring that to a more broad effort, and then if so, who's gonna do it?
Right, okay. Yeah, it seems like a wish list item right now, but you never know. It turns into a
Yeah,
must have.
and then you need it in like 4 days. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm gonna ask the question, is because to that point, so as Josh and Sarah mentioned, a lot of this we're building to support what we're doing in actual analytics. But the second purpose, which is just only slightly less high priority there, is to support the broader community. So if you're in any of these and say, oh, this would be great if you only add this extra additional flag or this extra term, then just drop, Josh or Sarah a note, and we'll put that in our discussion, because a lot of times it's not a whole lot of extra effort to put something in there if we think it's going to be broadly applicable. For those that really like this subject, they have a user group that needs to discuss, to talk through those in any great detail. So that's what I would say. Just keep it in mind when you're using it, is not just what's in there, but anything you like, even if it's super wish listy, send it to them and we'll talk it through and consider it.
And that's something on the predicted mild side that, Jared, you actually analyzed my issue activity, right? And it was like kind of maybe useful. Yeah, it is currently in the predicted models, right?
Yeah.
It's in my workflow, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but we switched it up from the way it was being used in the retention dashboard.
Yeah, because that was they use cohort by academic level or something.
Yeah, so we switched, we nuanced it a little bit. So yeah, my recollection is that it's moderately predictive of whether or not they're going to persist to the next term census, but not anything that's really jumped out at us and say we need to incorporate the data.
Yeah. So there is some basic my issue aggregation done in the student retention table in the warehouse.
Yeah, I think
And-
if we pull in one of our reports and it has a flag, I think if there's a yes
Yeah.
no flag and there's an hours usage for that term,
Yeah,
and then the flag is an average, I believe, it's an average of whether they're 30% above or below the average usage.
for the cohort,
Yeah.
which is based on academic level. Yeah, I don't know that I'd use the flag, but the counts are accessible. You don't want to have to create the count yourself. That data is massive.
And splitting it by modality. Versus academic level.
Just in person versus online. Anything else? Good to go?
This is awesome, you guys. Some of those, like, I'm interested in some of your like date table, and some of these like well documented, modernized, nicer to use. And to save me having to get more Alteryx jobs, which copy Redshift tables to AUDB, you guys, if it's not that hard, could you consider putting any of those things that aren't sensitive, like making them available? If you could make them in AUDB for everyone, I think it would also help. Like some of this stuff, maybe your guys, I think you guys could be like the warehouse version 3 stuff works. But if people start getting addicted to these like date tables and they want more of it.
Yeah, AUDB is. I've been pushing off something like that because there's been a lot of talks about building a lot of basic information into AUDB just to make it easier for people, because we know everyone's just copying the same thing over in their schemas. Really hoping eventually ET buys into Kristen's data virtualization platform that Ed Plus is kind of piloting right now, because then we don't need to.
We could all be like in Redshift.
Redshift and AUDB will basically be the same place within the virtualization layer.
Watch how that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I meant to ask some of the student table, for some of those sort of student profile tables, are there any plans to add advising committee or advising information?
I believe the advising committee's in student bio demo,
Yes.
which is going to prod this month, maybe?
Yeah, because it's in QA right now.
Yeah. So it's almost there.
The other hot item on that one that's going to be is first generation
Yeah.
flag. So it's a more comprehensive first generation flag than what's currently available in any other table.
Yeah, that was fun.
Those are things that are always sort of smart. So complicated.
Easy button.
All
We did the
right.
hard work for you.
I think we're
Over.
over a bit, so that's all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.